My husband came home from his work trip 3 days early. I know exactly what time it was because I had been watching the clock. Not for him. He wasn't supposed to be home until Friday, and it was Tuesday, and the clock I had been watching was the one on the microwave in the kitchen, the one that glows green in the dark, because I had been standing at the kitchen counter since 11 at night, doing what I had been doing every Tuesday night for 7 months, which was waiting for a call that came at 11:15 and lasted until 1 in the morning, and left me feeling, in the particular way of someone conducting a parallel life, both more alive and more ashamed than I knew how to manage. It was 12:43 when I heard his key in the lock. I want to tell you that I had a moment of preparation. I want to tell you that I heard the key and registered the sound and had time to compose myself before the door opened. I did not. There was no gap between the sound and the opening. He came in the way a person comes in when they are tired and flying alone and have been traveling since 6 in the morning. Quickly, without ceremony, pulling his roller bag behind him, reaching for the light switch before the door was fully closed. The light came on. He saw me standing at the kitchen counter with my phone in my hand. I saw him. There was a second, just 1 second, in which we were two people looking at each other across a kitchen at 12:43 in the morning. And in that second, everything that was about to happen was already determined, though neither of us had moved yet. He said, "You're up late." I said, "I couldn't sleep." He said, "Who were you talking to?" And that was it. That was the whole of the question. 4 words, asked in a voice that was not accusatory, that was not raised, that was the voice of a man who had been traveling since 6 in the morning and was standing in his kitchen and asking a question he already knew the answer to. Before I tell you the rest, subscribe, because every story on this channel is real, it is raw, and it will stay with you. And drop a comment right now. Where in the world are you watching from? I read every single one. Now let me tell you what happened in that kitchen. I am going to start further back because the answer to his question, "Who were you talking to?" does not make sense without the context of who we were when the question became possible. My name is Nora. I am 44 years old. I have been married to James for 16 years. We met when I was 27 and he was 30 at a conference in Portland that neither of us had particularly wanted to attend, at a dinner table where we were seated next to each other by the specific randomness of alphabetical order, his last name beginning with M, mine with N, which meant we had been seated together at dinner tables and in conference rooms and in auditorium rows my entire adult professional life. A series of small coincidences that I had always found tedious and that on that particular evening in Portland produced the conversation that produced the marriage, that produced the house, and the 2 children, and the 16 years that led to the kitchen at 12:43. I want to be honest about what our marriage was before this. Not the version of honest that is retroactive reconstruction, the kind where you look back after something has broken and find all the evidence of the breaking in the years before it, which is a natural and somewhat dishonest thing the mind does to give events the coherence they did not have while they were happening. The actually honest version. Our marriage was good. I mean that without qualification. 16 years is a long time, and in those 16 years there had been difficulty. The years when the children were small and we were both working, and the difficulty was the particular arithmetic of too many demands and too few hours. The years when James's mother was ill and he was divided in the way of a person trying to be everywhere at once. The year I lost a pregnancy and we had to find our way through a grief that neither of us had language for and that sat between us for months, like a weight neither of us knew how to lift. There had been all of that, and through all of that the marriage had held. Not because we were extraordinary people, but because we were people who had decided, repeatedly and deliberately, to hold it. I am telling you this because I need you to understand that what happened was not the result of a bad marriage. It was not the result of neglect or resentment or the accumulated distance of two people who had grown apart. It was something that happened inside a good marriage, which is its own specific kind of terrible, the kind that does not have the explanation that a bad marriage provides. His name was Patrick. I am going to tell you about him not because the details of him are the point of this story, but because the telling requires honesty, and the honesty requires that I not reduce him to a category. He was a category. He was the person I should not have been talking to at 11:15 on Tuesday nights. He was also a person I had known for 8 years, a colleague who had become, over those 8 years, a specific kind of presence in my life, someone I talked to differently than I talked to anyone else, someone with whom a particular kind of conversation was possible that felt, in the moment of having it, necessary in a way I did not examine closely enough. I'm not going to tell you that I didn't know what I was doing. I knew exactly what I was doing. What I did not know was that knowing is not the same as stopping. James's trip was supposed to be 5 days. He was in Chicago for a series of meetings. He runs the Midwest operations for a logistics company, which means he travels a great deal, which means there had been many Tuesdays over the preceding 7 months when the house was quiet and the children were in bed and the phone rang at 11:15. Not all of those Tuesdays were the same. Some were conversations. Some were only conversations, and I want you to hold that distinction because it is a real one, even if I understand that it is also a convenient one. He came home 3 days early because the Tuesday meeting had been canceled. That is the whole of the reason. A meeting was canceled, a flight was rescheduled, and a man who had been traveling since 6 in the morning came home to his kitchen at 12:43 in the morning and found his wife at the counter with her phone and asked her who she was talking to. I said, "A friend." He set his bag down. He did not take his coat off. He stood in the kitchen in his coat at 12:43 in the morning, and he looked at me. He said, "What friend?" This is the moment I have returned to more than any other in the 2 years since it happened. Not because of what I said next, which was a name, Patrick's name, offered in a voice that was neither loud nor quiet, but simply flat. The voice of someone who has understood that there is no longer any available version of the next 10 minutes that does not include the truth. But because of what happened in James's face in the second before I said it, he had already known. He had known, I think, for longer than that Tuesday. He had known in the way that people who love someone know things they have not been told, not consciously, not in the form of facts they could enumerate, but in the body, in the particular quality of attention they have been paying to the person they love, which is always more precise than either of them acknowledges. When I said Patrick's name, what moved across his face was not surprise. It was something else, something I did not have a word for in that moment, and that I have been trying to name ever since. The closest I have come is recognition. The face of a person who has been carrying a question for a long time and has just been handed the answer, and for whom the answer is both worse and more bearable than the question, because at least the answer can be dealt with. The question could not be dealt with. The question was just, wait. He said, "How long?" I said, 7 months. He said, "Is it over?" I said, "Yes." He said, "When did it end?" I said, 3 weeks ago. He said, "Did you end it or did he?" I said, "I ended it." He looked at me for a long moment. Then he said, "I'm going to sleep in the guest room tonight. We'll talk tomorrow." He picked up his bag. He walked past me to the hallway. He did not touch me. He did not raise his voice. He went to the guest room, and he closed the door, and I stood at the kitchen counter until the green clock on the microwave read 2:17. And then I sat down on the kitchen floor, which is the kind of thing you do when you have run out of places to put yourself. I want to tell you about the morning. The children, our son Owen, who is 14, and our daughter Lucy, who is 11, were up at 7. They saw James's bag in the hallway and came downstairs, surprised and glad in the way of children who did not know their father was coming home early and who find him at the kitchen table drinking coffee as if nothing has happened. Because James is a person who is capable, in the specific way of someone who has decided to protect the people he loves, of sitting at a kitchen table, drinking coffee, and telling his children that his meeting got canceled and asking them how their Tuesday was. I stood at the counter making toast, and I watched him do this, and I thought, this is a person who is protecting them. Even now. Even in this. The children went to school. The house went quiet. James poured more coffee. He did not look at me for a long moment. Then he did. He said, "Tell me everything." This is another moment I have returned to often. Not because of what I told him. I told him the truth, all of it, in the specific and terrible way of someone who has been waiting to tell the truth and has finally been asked. But because of the quality of his request, tell me everything. Not, how could you? Not, why? Tell me everything. He asked because he is a person who believes that the full shape of a thing is less dangerous than the partial shape. That not knowing is more damaging than the worst knowledge. I have always known this about him. It is one of the things I have loved about him. In that kitchen on a Wednesday morning, watching him ask me to give him the thing that would hurt him most, I understood it as an act of extraordinary courage that I had done nothing to deserve. I told him everything. It took an hour and 40 minutes. He asked questions, specific, quiet questions, not questions designed to wound, questions designed to understand. The architecture of it, the timeline, the nature of what it had been. Whether I loved Patrick, a question I had to sit with before I could answer. Because the honest answer was complex, and I owed him the complex answer rather than the simple one. I said, "I don't think so. I think what it was something I was missing that I didn't know how to ask you for, and he was there, and I made a choice I should not have made." James said, "What were you missing?" I said, "I don't fully know yet. I've been trying to understand it." He said, "That's not good enough." I said, "I know. I'm sorry." He said, "I don't want the apology right now. I want the understanding. Because without the understanding, we can't fix whatever made this possible." I had not thought of it that way. I had been thinking of it as a thing I had done, a failure of character, a choice that needed to be atoned for. He was thinking of it as a problem, with a cause that needed to be identified before it could be addressed. This was, I would come to understand, the specific way that James approaches every difficult thing. Not who is responsible, but what happened and why, and what do we do now? I did not deserve that. I want to be clear about that. I had not earned the version of James who sat at his kitchen table and asked to understand rather than to punish. I had earned the other version. he gave me the first one anyway. The weeks after that Wednesday were the hardest of my adult life. I want to tell you that in the honest way, without the softening that retrospect sometimes provides. They were hard in a way that did not have days off. They were hard in the specific way of two people trying to continue functioning, continuing to parent, continuing to work, continuing to be in a house together, while also trying to determine whether the thing that held them together was something that could hold this. We told the children nothing specific. Children sense disruption without being told the shape of it, and Owen and Lucy sensed something. There was a quality of careful in the house that had not been there before, a particular attention James and I were paying to each other that was different from our ordinary attention. Owen asked me once, in the car on the way to his practice, if James and I were okay. I said, "We're working through something, but we love each other and we love you, and nothing about that is changing." He said, "Okay." And then, "Is it serious?" I said, "It was. It is not anymore." He said, "Okay." And he did not ask again, which is the specific wisdom of a 14-year-old who has understood that there are things adults need to carry alone. We started therapy in the 3rd week. A couples therapist named Dr. Marcus Webb, no relation to anyone in this story, who works in the Eastlake neighborhood of Seattle and who has a way of asking questions that makes you feel that the question was obvious and you simply had not thought of it before. He asked me, in our 2nd session, what I thought I had been looking for. I said, "I'm not sure I was looking for anything. I think it crept up on me." He said, "That's a description of what happened, not an explanation of why." I sat with that. I said, "I think I had stopped asking James for things. I think I had decided, without deciding, that asking for things was a form of burden I was not willing to impose. And Patrick was someone who asked me things, who wanted to know what I thought and felt about things that were not logistical. And I mistook the relief of being asked for something more than it was." Dr. Webb looked at James. James said, "You could have asked me." I said, "I know." James said, "I would have asked you if I had known you needed asking." I said, "I know that too. I know that now." Dr. Webb said, "Why didn't you know it then?" I said, "Because somewhere along the way I had gotten very good at not needing things, and I didn't notice when not needing became not asking." James looked at me for a long moment. Then he said something I have thought about every day since. He said, "You have been managing me. For how long?" I did not know what he meant at first. Then I did. He meant, "You have been deciding what I can handle. You have been editing yourself for my benefit. You have been presenting me with a version of you that does not require things, because at some point you decided that the version of you that requires things would be too much." He was right. I did not know it until he said it, and then I knew it completely. He said, "I didn't marry the version that doesn't require things. I married the whole version. I would like to meet her again." That sentence broke something open in me that had been closed for longer than 7 months. It broke something open that had been closed, I think, for most of our marriage. A room I had sealed without realizing I had sealed it, and had then been standing in the hallway outside wondering why I felt so far from him. That is what Patrick had been, not a love affair, a door. The problem with this understanding, which is a real understanding, not a retroactive construction, is that it does not make the thing I did forgivable. I want to be careful about that. Understanding the mechanism does not discharge the debt. I had made choices for 7 months that I should not have made, and understanding why I made them is not the same as being forgiven for them. James was generous with his understanding in a way that I had not earned and have been working every day since to deserve. He stayed. I want to tell you that plainly because I know that is the question you are carrying. He stayed. Not because it was easy and not because it was immediate. There were weeks in the months after that Wednesday when I was not certain he would, when I watched him in the evening in our living room and could not read what was happening behind his face, when the uncertainty was a physical thing I carried from morning to night. He stayed because he is a person who believes that 16 years of something real is worth the work of understanding what broke and why and how to build it differently. I do not take that for granted. I am aware every day of the specific gift of it. There are things that have changed and will not change back. The ease that was native to our first years together, the particular unself-consciousness of early marriage, before you have accumulated anything that needs to be managed, that ease is different now. It has been replaced by something that is, in some ways, less comfortable and in other ways, more real. We are more deliberate with each other now, more careful in the best sense. The sense of people who have learned what carelessness costs and have decided they are not willing to pay it again. I still think about the kitchen at 12:43 sometimes. I think about the green clock and the roller bag and the second in which we looked at each other before anything had been said. I think about the face James made when I said Patrick's name, the recognition, not surprise, the relief, almost, of the question becoming answerable. I think about what it would have been if he had not come home early, if the meeting had not been canceled, if the flight had not been rescheduled, if he had come home on Friday as planned. I had ended it 3 weeks before. The calls had stopped. I had been, in the weeks between ending it and that Tuesday night, trying to carry the thing alone, trying to determine whether I was going to tell him or carry it until the carrying became impossible. I do not know what I would have done. I would like to believe I would have told him. I am not certain enough of that to claim it. What I know is that a canceled meeting and a rescheduled flight brought him home to a kitchen at 12:43, and the green clock on the microwave, and a question asked in a flat voice by a tired man in a coat. Who were you talking to? 4 words. And then 2 years of learning to be honest in the specific way that I had not been honest before. Not dishonest, not lying, but not fully present either. Not fully asking for the things I needed. Not fully trusting that the whole of me was something he could hold. It turns out he can hold it. It turns out he always could. That is the thing I am learning to live with, not the guilt, though the guilt is there, and I suspect it will be for a long time. The thing I am learning to live with is the knowledge that I had a person who could hold all of me, and I did not let him. And it cost us both something we cannot fully get back. What we have instead is different, and in some ways harder, and in other ways, in the ways that matter, in the ways that come from choosing each other deliberately instead of by the momentum of accumulated years, more true. Owen is 15 now, Lucy is 12. They know something happened, and they know their parents worked through it, and they know, in the way that children know things without being told, that the working through was real, and that the house they are growing up in is different from the house they were growing up in 2 years ago, and that different is not the same as worse. James and I go for a walk on Sunday mornings. We started during the therapy. Dr. Webb suggested it, not as homework but as a structure, a time and place that belonged to us, and that could not be interrupted by the ordinary logistics of a family life. We still go. An hour, most Sundays, through the neighborhood and down to the water and back. We talk, or we don't, and both are comfortable now in a way that is earned rather than assumed. Last Sunday he reached for my hand, not dramatically, in the ordinary way of a person reaching for the hand of someone they have been walking next to for a long time. I took it. I thought about alphabetical order, about a conference in Portland and a dinner table where M comes before N, about all the small and arbitrary things that produced the 16 years, and the house, and the children, and the kitchen at 12:43, and the 2 years of learning to hold the whole of each other. I have been thinking lately about what I would say to the version of me that was standing at the kitchen counter at 11:15 on a Tuesday night. I have been thinking about it the way you think about something you cannot change, but that you need to understand before you can put it down. I think I would say, ask him. Whatever it is you are missing, ask him. He is standing right there. He has been standing right there for 16 years, and he will hold what you give him. You do not have to seal the room. You do not have to manage him. You do not have to be the version that does not require things. Give him the whole version. He married the whole version. He would like to meet her. She's here now. Later than she should have been, and at a cost she did not have the right to impose. But she is here. I want to tell you one more thing about that Wednesday morning, the morning after he came home. After I told him everything, after the hour and 40 minutes of truth-telling that left us both sitting at the kitchen table in the specific exhaustion of people who have said things that cannot be unsaid. James got up and poured himself more coffee. He stood at the counter with his back to me for a moment. Then he turned around. He said, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer it honestly." I said, "Okay." He said, "Do you want to be here? In this marriage? Not out of obligation, and not because of the children, and not because it's easier than leaving. Do you want to be here?" I understood the weight of the question. It was not a question about Patrick or about what I had done. It was a question about what I chose, about whether I was in this marriage because I had chosen it, or because I had never gotten around to unchoosing it, which is a thing that happens, a thing that had perhaps been happening to me in the years before the Tuesday nights, without my fully understanding it. I sat with the question for longer than was comfortable. I said, "Yes, I want to be here. I want to be here with you specifically. Not with the idea of marriage, not out of habit. With you." He said, "Why?" I said, "Because you just came home from a work trip after 6 a.m, and you found your wife on the phone, and you asked her who she was talking to, and when she told you the truth, your first instinct was to sleep in the guest room and talk in the morning, instead of burning the house down. And the next morning, instead of punishing me, you asked me to tell you everything. And when I told you everything, you asked what you could do differently. That is who you are. I have been stupid enough not to see it clearly for long enough. I see it now." He looked at me. He said, "That's not nothing." I said, "No, it's not nothing." He sat back down. He did not touch me yet. It would be weeks before he could, and I did not ask him to. And the not asking was the first honest thing I had done in 7 months. But he sat back down at the kitchen table, and he picked up his coffee, and he said, "Okay, we'll figure this out." We are still figuring it out. That is the honest answer. 2 years later, and we are still, in some ways, in the middle of the figuring. There are evenings when I can see him carrying something he has not yet found the words for, and I have learned to ask instead of waiting. And the asking is still sometimes uncomfortable for both of us, because we are building the habit of it, and habits take time. There are evenings when we are simply two people making dinner in a kitchen, dividing the tasks without discussion because we have done it 10,000 times and know each other's rhythms. And in those evenings, I am aware of the ordinary miracle of a Tuesday that is just a Tuesday. Not a night the green clock matters. Not a night I am waiting for a call. Just an evening in a life that is mine and that I have chosen to be in. I choose it every day now, deliberately. Not because I have to, but because I have learned what it means to not choose. And I do not want that life. I want this one, the real one. The one where the whole of me is in the room. James knows I am telling this story. I asked him if he was willing, and he sat with it for a moment, and then he said, "Tell it. Tell it because maybe it will help someone ask for the thing they need before the Tuesday nights start." That is who he is. That is the person I almost threw away. I did not deserve the grace of 1243. I did not deserve the canceled meeting or the man in the coat who asked 4 words instead of burning the house down. I have spent 2 years trying to become someone who deserves it. Some days I think I'm getting closer. There is something I have not told you yet about the 7 months, about the Tuesday nights specifically. The calls with Patrick lasted until 1 in the morning usually, sometimes later. And in the mornings after those calls, on the Wednesdays when James was still in Chicago, when I made breakfast for the children and packed their lunches and drove them to school, I would come home to a quiet house, and I would sit at the kitchen table in the particular exhaustion of a person who has been awake until 1 and then awake again at 6:30, and I would feel, underneath the tiredness, a specific kind of self-disgust that I had gotten very good at managing. The managing was what I did not recognize as dangerous. I had become so skilled at managing the self-disgust, at finding a place to put it that was accessible enough that I could acknowledge it, but contained enough that it did not interfere with the functioning of the day, that I had lost the ability to let it do its actual work. Self-disgust is supposed to stop you. It is the mechanism by which we regulate ourselves, the internal voice that says, "This is wrong. Stop doing this." I had learned to hear it and file it and continue, which is a form of moral deafness that I did not understand I had developed until the deafness was complete. I think about the children on those mornings, Owen at 14, Lucy at 11, eating their cereal and asking ordinary morning questions while their mother stood at the counter in the quiet house making their lunches and knowing what she had been doing at 11:15 the night before. I do not know what to do with that knowledge. I have sat with it in therapy, and I have sat with it alone, and I have not found a way to hold it that does not feel like failure. What I have found is this: I did not bring it into the room with them. The wall between what I was doing and what I was giving them held. This is not the same as it being acceptable. But it is the truth, and the truth is what I have. Owen knows now. Not the details. He is 15 and does not need the details, but he knows that something happened and that his parents went through something difficult and that they chose each other on the other side of it. He asked me once, last spring, in the car again. Cars seem to be where he asks the real questions, perhaps because we are both looking forward and the side-by-side is easier than face-to-face. He asked me if I was happy. I said, "Yes." "Are you?" He said, "I think so. You and Dad seem more like each other now. It's hard to explain." I said, "More like each other?" He said, "Like you're paying more attention. Like you actually see each other." He is 15. He articulated in one sentence what Dr. Webb spent 6 months trying to help us name. I told James what Owen had said. James was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "He's a good kid." I said, "He is." We were making dinner when this conversation happened. He was at the stove and I was at the counter, and the kitchen was ordinary in the particular way of a weekday evening in a family with 2 children, and we were standing in the same kitchen where the green clock glows green in the dark, and neither of us said anything else because neither of us needed to. We see each other. We actually see each other. I am 44 years old, and I am learning, later than I should have, what it means to be fully in a room. To give the person you love the whole of yourself instead of the version you have decided is manageable. To ask for what you need instead of constructing elaborate alternative architectures for getting it. It is not easy. It is, in fact, harder than the version I was living before, the version where I managed everything quietly and efficiently, and at some point started calling Patrick at 11:15 on Tuesday nights. The harder version requires more of me. It requires me to be uncomfortable in the specific way of a person who is asking for something and does not know if they will get it. It requires me to trust that what I need is something James can hold. He can hold it. He has always been able to hold it. I just had to stop protecting him from the weight of it and let him. Sunday mornings, walking to the water, his hand in mine, the ordinary and specific and chosen life. That is the story I am keeping.